On a quiet night, during my hospital shift, my phone buzzed with an angry series of Snapchat messages from my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Dr. Carter, could you and your wife keep it down during your nighttime activities? We have kids in the next apartment. This has been going on for 5 nights straight. I knock on your door, and you guys just play dead. Are you doing this on purpose? Your wife is paralyzed, and you're still pushing her like that? You bastard. Sitting at my desk, still typing up medical records, a cold sweat broke out over my entire body. I had been working consecutive night shifts for the past 5 days. I hadn't set foot in my apartment once. The moment my colleague arrived to cover my shift, I threw on my jacket and rushed out of the hospital. I dialed Chloe's number repeatedly as I sped down the highway, but there was no answer. Strangely, Olivia, our live-in caregiver who never missed a call, wasn't picking up either. Anxiety clawed at my chest, making my foot press harder on the gas pedal. Chloe, and I'd always been so in love. She would never betray me. Besides, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Intense physical intimacy was physically impossible for her. Then there was Olivia. Chloe had complained to me multiple times that Olivia was always on the phone with some sketchy guy during work hours. If I hadn't been so busy and unable to find a replacement, I would have fired her weeks ago. Did that girl actually have the audacity to bring a man into my home? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I flew into our driveway at 80 miles an hour. My hand shook so violently that it took me 3 tries to punch in the door code. The apartment was pitch black, filled with the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. Chloe? Olivia? I called out, but only silence answered. A terrible dread washed over me. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. What I saw made my heart stop. Chloe was sprawling on the hardwood floor, struggling to crawl. Olivia was nowhere to be seen. Chloe's hair and face were soaked with sweat, and her wrists were covered in raw, red friction burns. Fury boiled inside me. That useless girl Olivia must have tied Chloe up just so she could have her little tryst in our apartment. How dare she? Chloe lifted her head, her tear-filled eyes locking onto mine. Ethan? What are you doing home? Her voice was incredibly raspy. My heart wrenched in pain. How long had she been crying? I rushed over, lifted her gently, and carried her back to the bed. I pulled her into my arms, stroking her damp hair tenderly. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I came back so late. I'll let you go through this. If the neighbor hadn't messaged me, I wouldn't have known this psychopath of a caregiver was doing this to you. Chloe's body suddenly stiffened, and she pulled back slightly from my embrace. The neighbor? What did they tell you? Seeing the sheer panic in her eyes only made my chest ache more. Chloe, Olivia has been bringing a man here for the past 5 days. Has she been locking you up like this the whole time? Why didn't you tell me? Did she threaten you? Chloe let out a long, shuddering breath, then buried her face back into my chest. Ethan, you're so busy at the hospital. You save lives. I didn't want you to worry about me. And the man she brought, he's huge, muscular, and looks so dangerous. I was terrified you'd get into a fight with him and get hurt. Listening to her soft, fragile whimpers, my self-loathing reached its peak. My beautiful wife had endured such abuse at home just to keep me focused on my work. At the same time, my hatred for Olivia reached a boiling point. I pulled out my phone to dial 911. But before I could hit call, Chloe snatched the phone out of my hand. She gripped my hand tightly, her eyes begging me. Please don't. If the police get involved, everyone in the building will know. They'll look at me with pity. I can't take that. Looking at her fragile, pleading face, I felt utterly defeated. Chloe had been paralyzed for years. Despite the expensive experimental medications and my daily physical therapy sessions with her, there was never any improvement. To pay for her treatments, I worked endless overtime, leaving her alone more and more. I had watched her grow increasingly insecure and fragile over the years. To avoid the pitying stares of strangers, she hadn't left the apartment in months. She wouldn't even go to the clinic for her checkups. It was my fault. I wasn't rich enough, and I wasn't a good enough doctor to cure her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, followed by a car alarm blaring and 2 men shouting obscenities at each other. Instinctively, I moved toward the window to check, but Chloe gripped my hand even tighter. She pulled me down to her, burying her face back into my chest. Ethan, I'm so scared. Please don't leave me. Not even for a second. I stopped. I wrapped my arms around her again. Nothing in this world was more important than Chloe. I held her in bed until her breathing slowed and she drifted off to sleep. Gently, I slid my arm out from under her, walked into the bathroom, filled the tub with ice-cold water, and climbed in. Chloe and I had never consummated our marriage. On countless sleepless, agonizing nights, this was how I calmed my burning desires, shivering in a tub of ice water. To me, sacrificing my own needs was just another way of loving her. But tonight the bathroom smelled strange. A foul, metallic, fishy odor lingered in the air, giving me a splitting headache. I searched around and finally traced the smell to the trash can. Buried at the bottom was a pair of lacy red women's underwear. The anger I had just suppressed flared up again. That damn caregiver, Olivia. She actually used our bathroom for her dirty deeds. The next morning, I threw the trash out. I gave Chloe her sponge bath, changed her underpads as I did every day, and prepared to leave for work. But Chloe was acting strange. She seemed exceptionally clingy. Ethan, when will you be home today? Normally, she never asked, fearing she'd distract me. She was clearly still traumatized by yesterday. I stroked her hair gently. I'll come straight home after my shift. I'll make your favorite, creamy Tuscan chicken. Despite wanting to stay, I had to leave. Chloe's experimental meds were running low, and I needed to find a freelance gig to cover the next batch. As I drove around the corner of our street, my phone rang. It was Olivia. Before I could even speak, she screamed through the receiver. Dr. Carter, did you seriously blackball me in the agency for bringing men over? How am I supposed to get another job now? If you have this much free time, you should watch your own wife. Stop acting like a clueless idiot. I hadn't even tracked her down yet, and she had the nerve to call and yell at me? But what did she mean by that last sentence? Before I could ask, she slammed the phone down. I spammed her on Snapchat, but she blocked me instantly. A cold, uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. Unable to shake it off, I called in sick and turned the car around. When I pulled into our apartment's underground garage, I found my assigned parking spot occupied. After calling the number on the windshield several times, a tall, muscular man with a cast on his leg limped over. He was panting heavily, and I noticed fresh hickeys peppering his neck. I recognized him. He was the jerk who always stole my parking spot. When I complained, he didn't even apologize. He just gave me a menacing glare, got in his car, and drove off. It wasn't even noon, and I'd already been yelled at twice. My mood was in the gutter. Walking into the apartment, the sight of Chloe sleeping peacefully calmed my nerves. I gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. That's when I noticed a faint smudge of pink lipstick on the corner of her mouth. I hadn't applied any makeup on her this morning. She never wore makeup at home. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Instinctively, my eyes drifted down to Chloe's thighs. Over the years, despite my daily massages, her muscles should have shown some signs of atrophy from lack of use. But as I stared at her legs, I realized something I had been too blind to notice before. Her thighs were as firm, toned, and perfectly shaped as they were before the accident. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered open. She looked startled to see me. Ethan, why are you back? Is there something wrong with my legs? I quickly shook my head, forcing a smile. No, nothing. I just realized I forgot to do your physical therapy massage this morning. I couldn't stop worrying, so I came back. She giggled and pinched my nose, but then her face fell, and tears began to pool in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ethan. It's all because I'm a useless cripple. I make your life so hard. In the past, my heart would have broken. I would have held her tight and told her how much I loved her. But today, Olivia's warning, the muscular man with the cast, and the perfect shape of her legs created a dark cloud of suspicion in my mind. Was it possible that Chloe's legs had already healed? To find out the truth, I went to the bathroom, wrung out a towel in scalding hot water, and walked back to the bedroom. Let's do a quick hot compress first, I said casually, pressing the steaming towel directly on her thigh. The intense heat turned her skin bright red instantly. I watched her face closely. Her expression didn't change at all. She kept smiling up at me, warm and affectionate. A wave of intense guilt washed over me. I felt like a monster. Chloe loved me so much, and here I was, testing her and hurting her. I was disgusting. Panicked, I grabbed the burn ointment and began applying it to her skin with trembling hands. As blister after blister began to form on her fair skin, tears of pure remorse streamed down my face. Chloe, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. Chloe paused, then slowly used her arms to lift her upper body, pulling my head into her lap. It's okay, silly. I can't feel anything anyway. It doesn't hurt. She reached into the nightstand, pulled out a carton of milk, inserted a straw, and handed it to me. You look exhausted, babe. Drink some milk and take a nap. You need to rest. My heart warmed. I took a big gulp. But the moment the liquid hit my tongue, a faint, bitter aftertaste sent a chill down my spine. As a doctor, I knew that taste instantly. It was a dissolved sleeping pill. Chloe was staring at me, her eyes locked onto mine, waiting. I didn't know how she had gotten her hands on the pills, but I knew one thing. Right now, she desperately needed me to pass out. To play along, I pretended to yawn heavily. I need to use the bathroom first, I mumbled. I rushed to the bathroom, shoved my fingers down my throat, and threw up every drop of the milk. Then I walked back, stumbled onto the bed, and closed my eyes, letting my breathing fall into a deep, heavy rhythm. After a few minutes, I felt Chloe lean over me. She waved her hand in front of my face. Once she was absolutely sure I was dead to the world, she let out a cold, disgusted sneer. Useless simp. Through the tiny slit of my eyelids, I watched my paralyzed wife throw back the blanket, swing her legs over the edge of the bed, and stand straight up on her own 2 feet. She walked over to the closet, changed into a skin-tight, sexy dress, slipped into a pair of high heels, and walked out the door. The moment I heard the elevator doors slide shut, I bolted out of bed. I grabbed my keys and followed her, keeping my distance. I hopped into a taxi and trailed her Uber. Chloe's Uber pulled up to a trendy, upscale street. She walked straight toward a vending machine tucked into a dark alley. She pressed a sequence of buttons, and the machine swung outward like a door. It was a hidden speakeasy. I waited a minute, copied her actions, and slipped inside. The club was dimly lit, packed with people, and pulsing with loud electronic music. I had never been to a place like this and felt completely out of place. After pushing through the crowd, I finally spotted her in a VIP booth in the corner. Chloe was draped over a tall, muscular guy, her fingers tracing his jawline playfully. It was the jerk from the garage. My mind reeled. Was that why he always parked in my spot? So he could keep tabs on when I was home or at work. The humiliation of being cheated on burned hot in my chest. I clenched my fists and walked toward the booth. But as I reached the heavy velvet curtain of their booth, Chloe's voice drifted out. Babe, I think Ethan is starting to suspect something. He's been acting really weird lately. It's all because of that nosy neighbor. She actually Snapchatted him to complain. What a bitch. And because of her, you had to jump out of my bedroom window and break your leg. I'm so sorry, baby. The man chuckled, pulling her closer. What are you scared of? If he finds out, we just throw it in his face. He's just a broke, pathetic resident doctor. What's he gonna do? Fight me? You're too hot to be stuck with a loser like him anyway. He planted a wet kiss on her lips, and Chloe giggled, slapping his chest playfully. Stop it. If it weren't for revenge, I would have divorced him years ago. If he hadn't botched my surgery back then, I wouldn't have spent years recovering. All my suffering is his fault. You think he's staying with me out of love? He's just trying to ease his own guilty conscience. But you're the smart one, babe. Getting your buddy at the rehab center to fake the bills? We split the therapy money he pays, and my secret savings account is looking very nice right now. The man laughed loudly. Well, you're the mastermind who came up with the plan to get rich off his guilt. Their laughter echoed in the booth, but everything went dead silent in my mind. I stood there, frozen. The thumping bass of the music sounded like a chorus of mockery, needles piercing my brain. I never could have imagined that this was how Chloe saw me. Years ago, when I first met Chloe, it was my first year as a resident. She had been in a horrific car crash. When she was wheeled into the ER, her legs were a mangled, bloody mess. She needed immediate, highly specialized surgery. But the moment her parents heard the projected cost, they hesitated. Even with the surgery, she might still end up paralyzed, right? Her father had asked. We can't afford this. We have a son to think about. Even when I offered to help them set up a payment plan through the hospital, they flatly refused to sign the consent form. I couldn't bear to see a young girl lose her legs forever because of her parents' selfishness. So, driven by my duty as a doctor, I made a risky decision. I pushed her into the OR and performed the surgery, taking full responsibility. Although I saved her legs, the delay caused by her parents meant she still required extensive rehabilitation, and a full recovery was never guaranteed. For years, I gave up opportunities to study abroad, turned down promotions, and skipped conferences just so I could stay by her side, massaging her legs and taking care of her every need. But her legs just wouldn't get better. Eventually, she told me she wanted to give up, and the rehab center staff subtly suggested I stop bringing her in. I had carried that guilt for years. I suffered from insomnia, constantly blaming myself for not being a better doctor. And all this time, they were just playing me for a fool to steal my money. The revelation didn't hit me like a sudden lightning bolt. It felt more like a slow, freezing anesthetic creeping through my veins, numbing my heart until it was nothing but a heavy, hollow stone in my chest. I stood behind the heavy velvet curtain of the VIP booth, the thumping bass of the club vibrating through the soles of my shoes, matching the frantic, irregular rhythm of my pulse. Inside, the woman I had spent the last 5 years of my life worshiping, the woman for whom I had ruined my sleep, my finances, my career prospects, and my own sanity, was laughing. It was a rich, throaty, mocking sound, a sound I had never heard her make in all the years she had spent playing the fragile, broken victim in our quiet, sterile apartment. A useless simp, she had called me. A broke, pathetic resident. Her lover, the parking spot jerk, had echoed. My hands, usually so steady during delicate surgical procedures, clenched in a fist so tight that my fingernails bit into my palms, drawing thin, sharp lines of pain. I wanted to tear down the curtain. I wanted to wrap my hands around Marcus's thick neck. I wanted to scream at Chloe, to demand to know how she could look at me every day with those big, tear-filled eyes while systematically bleeding me dry. But then the cold, clinical side of my brain, the part of me trained to handle chaotic trauma bays and failing vitals, took over. If you react now, a quiet voice whispered in my head, they win. He is bigger than you. She has the law on her side as a disabled spouse. You have no proof of her fraud, no proof of her infidelity, and no proof of her mobility. You will look like a crazed, abusive husband attacking a paralyzed woman and a helpful neighbor. I closed my eyes, took a single deep, quiet breath of the stale, alcohol-scented air, and stepped back. I turned around and walked out of the speakeasy. The cold night air hit my face like a slap as I stepped onto the neon-lit street. I didn't take a taxi back. Instead, I walked. I walked for miles, my mind spinning, piecing together the puzzle of the last 5 years. Every single piece of the puzzle fit with sickening precision. 5 years ago, when Chloe was brought into the ER, her legs were a mangled mess of muscle, bone, and torn arteries. Her parents, wealthy but incredibly cold, had refused to sign a consent form for the highly experimental, expensive emergency surgery. They had openly muttered about how a disabled daughter would be a financial drain and how they needed to save their resources for their golden child son's Ivy League education. I had been a young, idealistic resident. I couldn't stand by and watch a 22-year-old girl lose her legs because of her family's cruelty. I bypassed the standard administration protocols, claiming emergency implied consent to preserve life and limb, and spent 9 grueling hours in the operating room. I saved her legs, but because of the delay her parents had caused before I took charge, the nerve damage was severe. She needed intensive, long-term rehabilitation. Where her parents abandoned her at the hospital, I stayed. I fell in love with her vulnerability, her resilience, and her sweet, fragile smile. When we married, I took on her medical debt. And for 5 years, I had been paying $4,000 a month to the Vance Neuro Rehab Center, run by Dr. Kenneth Vance, a man Chloe had insisted was the only one who understood her specific nerve trauma. I had taken extra night shifts, skipped meals, and lived like a pauper. Also, she could have those specialist sessions. In reality, Dr. Vance was Marcus's childhood friend. The bills were fake. The specialist sessions were likely spent with Chloe and Marcus in bed, laughing at my expense, while my hard-earned money was funneled directly into a secret bank account. By the time I reached our apartment building, the sky was beginning to turn a faint, bruising shade of purple. The anger in my chest had settled into a hard, diamond-sharp resolve. I used my key to enter the apartment quietly. It was empty. The scent of her expensive perfume still lingered in the air. I walked into the bedroom, sat down on the edge of the bed, and waited. About 40 minutes later, the faint sound of the elevator chime echoed through the hallway. I immediately got up, walked to the living room couch, and lay down, draping an arm over my eyes as if I had fallen asleep there out of sheer exhaustion. The front door clicked open. Footsteps, light, soft, and completely unhurried, entered the foyer. I heard the rustle of shopping bags. Then the footsteps stopped. I kept my breathing slow and deep. A moment later, I heard the faint rustle of clothing, followed by a soft, dragging sound. She was putting on her act. Ethan, her voice whimpered, suddenly thick with exhaustion and mock vulnerability. Ethan, are you awake? I tried to get out of bed to get some water, but I fell. I opened my eyes, pretending to wake up from a deep, drug-induced slumber. I rubbed my face and rushed into the hallway. Chloe was sprawling on the floor near the kitchen, her eyes wide and watery, looking up at me like a lost child. The sheer disgust I felt nearly choked me, but I forced my face into an expression of pure, frantic worry. I rushed over and scooped her up. Her body was warm, and through her thin nightgown, I could feel the tight, perfectly toned muscles of her core and thighs. How had I been so blind? I was a doctor, for God's sake. But guilt is a powerful drug. It blindfolds you and makes you see only what you fear. Oh my God, Chloe. I murmured, my voice trembling with simulated panic. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep on the couch. I must have been more tired than I thought. Did you hurt your legs? No, I'm okay, she whispered, wrapping her arms around my neck and burying her face in my shoulder. She smelled faintly of smoke and expensive whiskey, masked poorly by a fresh spritz of floral perfume. I was just so thirsty. I didn't want to wake you. I'll get you some water, I said, carrying her back to the bed and tucking her in. As I walked into the kitchen, my mind was working at triple speed. I needed evidence. Real, undeniable, bulletproof evidence that would hold up in a court of law and before the medical board. If I just accused her, she would claim I was abusive, point to her medical records from Vance, and ruin my career. I had to play her game, but I had to play it better. First, I needed to locate Olivia. The next afternoon, after pretending to leave for a double shift at the hospital, I parked my car 3 blocks away and walked to a small, run-down diner on the edge of the city. It had taken me 3 hours of digging through old agency records and calling contacts to find Olivia's temporary address. She had been blacklisted by her agency after Chloe reported her for neglect and bringing unauthorized guests. I spotted Olivia sitting in a corner booth, staring morosely into a cup of black coffee. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped. I slid into the booth opposite her. She jumped, her eyes widening in anger when she saw my face. Dr. Carter, she spat, rising to leave. If you're here to threaten me or call the cops, save your breath. I've already lost my license and my apartment because of your psycho wife. Olivia, please. Sit down, I said, my voice quiet, hollow, and utterly devoid of the anger I had projected over the phone the day before. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to apologize. She paused, hovering over the seat, searching my face. Slowly, she sat back down. What do you mean, apologize? I know, I said simply. I know everything. Olivia stared at me, her defensive posture slowly melting into shock. You know, I know she can walk. I know about the man, Marcus. I know about the money. I saw her last night, Olivia. I saw her standing on her own 2 feet, wearing high heels, laughing at me in a club. Olivia let out a long, shaky breath and sank back against the vinyl seat. Oh, thank God. I thought you were completely brainwashed. Dr. Carter, I try to tell you. I really did. But every time I try to bring up how her physical therapy session seemed miraculous, or how her muscle tone didn't make sense, she would threaten me. What did she say? She told me that if I whispered a single word to you, she'd tell the police I was stealing her liquid morphine and selling it. She even showed me a hidden stash she had planted in my room. And then, 5 days ago, I actually caught them. I walked into your bedroom to bring her lunch, and she was on top of him, on the bed, moving perfectly normally. Olivia shuddered. When she saw me, she didn't even look scared. She just smiled and told me I was fired. She said if I went to you, she'd make sure I went to prison. I was terrified, Dr. Carter. That's why I left so suddenly. I was trying to find a way to warn you without ruining my own life. My heart ached for this innocent girl who had been dragged into their sick game. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I will make this right. I will clear your name with the agency, and I will compensate you for every single dime you lost. But I need your help. What do you want me to do? She asked, her eyes narrowing with a spark of righteous anger. I need a signed, notarized affidavit detailing everything you saw, and I need you to help me set a trap. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. During the day, I went to work, performing surgeries and treating patients with clinical precision. But the moment my shift ended, I turned into a detective. I hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, brilliant woman named Sarah, to look into the financial records of the Vance Neuro Rehab Center. It didn't take her long to find the rot. It's a classic kickback scheme, Dr. Carter, Sarah told me over a secure line. The invoices you've been paying are entirely fabricated. The tax identification number on the clinic's receipts belongs to a defunct shell company registered in Delaware. The money you transfer every month is immediately routed to a joint checking account held under the names of Chloe Carter and Marcus Vance. Vance. Marcus's last name was Vance. He was Kenneth Vance's brother. How much have they taken? I asked, my voice tight. Over the last 4 years? Approximately $280,000, Sarah replied. And there's more. Your wife has a secondary, offshore account in the Caymans. She's been transferring large sums from the joint account into that one. It looks like she's preparing to leave the country. Or she's planning something bigger. A malpractice lawsuit, I whispered, the realization hitting me. What was that? Nothing, I said. Thank you, Sarah. Keep digging. I need every bank statement, every transfer slip, and every forged invoice certified. If Chloe was planning to leave, she was waiting for a massive payday. And I knew exactly what that payday was. A few years ago, because of the unauthorized nature of the emergency surgery I performed to save her legs, the hospital's legal board had kept a file on her case. If she suddenly discovered that her continued paralysis was due to a surgical error I made, and if she had a corrupt doctor like Kenneth Vance to testify to that fact, she could sue both me and the hospital for millions. She wasn't just stealing my monthly salary. She was planning to completely destroy my life, strip me of my medical license, and walk away with a multi-million-dollar settlement. I returned to the apartment that evening, carrying a bag of groceries. Ethan, Chloe called out from the bedroom, her voice dripping with sweet affection. You're home early. I am, sweetheart, I said, putting on my warmest smile as I walked into the bedroom. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, fighting the urge to vomit at the touch of her skin. I have some amazing news. Her eyes lit up with curiosity. What is it? I've been offered a prestigious research fellowship in Switzerland, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her hand. I rubbed her knuckles gently. It pays 3 times my current salary. We'll be able to live in a beautiful chalet in Geneva, and they have some of the best neuro rehab facilities in the world. I watched her face closely. For a fraction of a second, sheer panic flashed across her eyes, followed quickly by greed. Switzerland, she murmured. But what about Dr. Vance? He's the only one who understands my condition. I don't know if I can just leave him. I thought about that, I said smoothly. So I spoke to him today. I told him we might be moving, and he suggested we do one final, comprehensive evaluation. He said he wants to compile all your medical records into a master file so the Swiss doctors can transition your care seamlessly. He said that, Chloe asked, her voice tight. Yes. In fact, he suggested we do a joint consultation next week. But since we're leaving, I want to do something special. I want to host a farewell dinner here in our apartment. We'll invite Dr. Vance and our helpful neighbor Marcus, since he's helped carry you down the stairs so many times when the elevator was broken, and even your parents. Chloe's eyes widened. My parents? Ethan, you know they abandoned me. Why would you invite them? Because, Chloe, I want them to see how well you're doing, I said, looking directly into her eyes, my voice dripping with a terrifyingly calm sincerity. I want them to see that despite their cruelty, we triumphed. I want them to see the beautiful life we've built and how much we've overcome. I want them to regret every single thing they did to you. Greed and pride are powerful motivators. I knew Chloe's parents were currently facing financial difficulties. I had checked. The prospect of showing off her wealthy, successful doctor husband and rubbing her success in her parents' faces was too delicious a temptation for Chloe to resist. She swallowed hard, a slow, manipulative smile spreading across her lips. You're right, Ethan. You're always so thoughtful. Let's do it. Let's show them. Perfect, I whispered. I'll handle all the arrangements. The week leading up to the dinner was a masterpiece of preparation. I installed 3 high-definition pinhole cameras in the apartment, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one in the bedroom. They were connected to a secure cloud server that only I and my lawyer, a sharp, ruthless man named Mr. Harrison, could access. The footage we captured over those 7 days was nothing short of damning. I watched, sitting in my hospital office during my breaks, as my paralyzed wife danced around the living room to music, tried on expensive dresses she had hidden in the back of her closet, and poured herself glasses of my vintage wine. I watched as Marcus came over the moment my car left the driveway. I watched them on our sofa, on our kitchen counter, laughing and plotting. Once the Swiss Fellowship contract is signed, we launched the lawsuit, Chloe said in one recording, draping herself over Marcus's lap. Kenneth has already drafted the medical report claiming Ethan used the wrong surgical technique during the emergency procedure, causing permanent nerve entrapment. With Ethan's new Swiss salary and the hospital's insurance, we're looking at a $5 million settlement, minimum. And what about the simp? Marcus asked, chuckling as he caressed her waist. He'll be ruined, Chloe sneered, her beautiful face contorting into something hideous. His license will be revoked. He'll be drowning in debt and disgrace. He can spend the rest of his life working in some rundown clinic while we're sipping cocktails on a beach in Bali. You're a genius, baby, Marcus whispered, kissing her. Watching the footage, I didn't feel sadness anymore. The grief had burned away, leaving only a cold, crystalline fury. I called Mr. Harrison and forwarded him the files. This is incredible, Ethan, Harrison said, his voice laced with professional awe. This isn't just fraud. It's conspiracy, extortion, and medical malpractice fraud. We don't just have enough to divorce her. We have enough to put all 3 of them in federal prison for a very long time. Not yet, I said quietly. Let them have their dinner first. The night of the dinner arrived. The apartment was beautifully decorated. I'd spent the afternoon preparing a lavish 3-course meal. A rich lobster bisque, followed by a perfectly seared beef tenderloin and a decadent chocolate lava cake for dessert. I had even set up a large projector screen in the living room. What's the screen for, babe? Chloe asked, sitting in her wheelchair, wearing a stunning emerald green silk dress that clung to her curves. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, a perfect, tragic angel. I made a slideshow, I said, smiling warmly as I adjusted her collar. A tribute to our 5 years together, and a thank you to everyone who helped us along the way. I want to play it after dessert. Oh, Ethan, you're too sweet, she cooed, patting my cheek. At 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. The guests arrived one by one. First were Chloe's parents, Richard and Eleanor. They walked in with their heads held high, trying to look wealthy, though the fraying cuffs of Richard's suit jacket gave away their financial decline. They looked at Chloe with a mixture of awkwardness and poorly hidden envy. Next was Dr. Kenneth Vance. He was a slick, middle-aged man with a manicured beard and a Rolex that was a little too shiny. He shook my hand with a firm, practiced grip. Dr. Carter, a pleasure. I must say, I'm sad to see Chloe leave my care, but Switzerland is a massive opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Vance, I said. Your dedication to her recovery has been unforgettable. Finally, Marcus arrived. He was limping slightly, his legs still in a cast from his window jumping incident, but he carried himself with an arrogant, swaggering confidence. Hey, Doc, Marcus said, offering a lazy smirk. Thanks for the invite. Just wanted to make sure my favorite neighbors were getting a proper send-off. Of course, Marcus, I said, returning his smirk with a polite nod. I couldn't have done any of this without you. We sat down at the dining table. The atmosphere was thick with tension, greed, and unspoken malice. Richard and Eleanor spent the first course boasting about their son's recent promotion, clearly trying to diminish my achievements. Chloe played the dutiful, fragile victim, occasionally sighing and leaning against me, while shooting secret, burning glances at Marcus across the table. Marcus and Dr. Vance exchanged subtle, knowing looks throughout the meal, like two hyenas waiting for a carcass to be served. "So, Ethan," Dr. Vance said, wiping his mouth with a napkin as I cleared the main course plates. "I brought the medical file we discussed. I have the complete history of Chloe's permanent nerve damage. I must say, looking back at the original surgical records, it's a miracle she survived it all. Though, of course, the initial surgical approach was highly unorthodox. He was already setting the stage. He was dropping the hints of malpractice right in front of her parents." "Unorthodox?" Richard piped up, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, doctor?" "Oh, nothing for the family to worry about," Dr. Vance said with a patronizing smile. "Just some technical details about how the nerves were handled during the initial emergency procedure. It's water under the bridge now, of course, though it did unfortunately seal her fate to this wheelchair." Chloe lowered her head, letting out a soft, shuddering sob. "It's okay, Dr. Vance. Ethan did his best. I don't blame him for making me like this." I stood by the kitchen counter, holding the dessert plates. I felt a wild, manic urge to laugh. The sheer audacity of these people, performing this elaborate, sick theater in my home, eating my food, while planning to ruin my life. "Well," I said, stepping into the dining room, my voice calm and steady. "Before we get to dessert, I think it's the perfect time for that slideshow I promised. I want to show you all the true story of Chloe's journey." I walked over to the projector, picked up the remote, and dimmed the dining room lights. The screen glowed to life. "This first slide," I said, as an image of Chloe in her hospital bed from 5 years ago appeared, "is where it all began. The night of the accident. The night her parents refused to sign a consent form to save her legs because they didn't want the financial burden." Richard and Eleanor stiffened in their seats. Eleanor's face flushed a deep, angry red. "Ethan, how dare you bring that up?" "Quiet, Eleanor," I said, my voice dropping its warm tone, replaced by a cold, commanding authority that made her freeze. "I'm speaking." I pressed the remote. The next slide is the financial record of the Vance Neuro Rehab Center. A document appeared on the screen. It was a certified bank statement showing my monthly $4,000 transfers, followed immediately by a routing slip transferring the exact same amount into a joint account owned by Chloe and Marcus Vance. The room went dead silent. Dr. Vance's face went completely pale. His hand, still holding his wine glass, began to tremble violently. What is the meaning of this? This is highly confidential medical. And this," I interrupted, pressing the button again, "is my favorite part." The screen split into a video player. The video began to play. It was crisp, high definition, and the audio was crystal clear. It was footage from 3 days ago. The camera angle was from the corner of our bedroom ceiling. On the screen, Chloe was standing on her own 2 feet, wearing a pair of red lacy underwear, the same ones I'd found in the trash, and dancing around the bed. A moment later, Marcus walked into the frame. He grabbed her, spun her around, and threw her onto the bed. The audio echoed loudly through the quiet dining room. Once the Swiss fellowship contract is signed, we launched the lawsuit. With Ethan's new Swiss salary and the hospital's insurance, we're looking at a $5 million settlement, minimum. He'll be ruined. He could spend the rest of his life working in some rundown clinic while we're sipping cocktails on a beach in Bali. On the video, Chloe giggled and kissed him. "He's such a useless simp. He actually thinks I've been crying in this room for 5 years." The video continued to play. In the dining room, the silence was deafening. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of Chloe's recorded laughter echoing from the speakers. Chloe sat frozen in her wheelchair, her face completely drained of color, her eyes wide with a terror so profound she couldn't even breathe. Marcus stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open, his arrogant swagger evaporating into thin air. "Ethan," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. "Ethan, please, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." "Explain what, Chloe?" I asked, walking over to the projector and turning the lights back on. The bright dining room lights exposed every single one of them, blinking like rats caught in a sudden beam of light. "Explain how you've been walking for years? Explain how you stole nearly $300,000 of my hard-earned money? Or explain how you and your lover's brother planned to sue me for malpractice to steal millions more?" "This is blackmail," Dr. Vance screamed, slamming his hands on the table as he stood up. "This is illegal surveillance. I will have your license for this." "Actually, Dr. Vance," a new voice spoke from the hallway. The front door, which I had left unlocked, pushed open. 4 police officers walked into the apartment, led by a detective in a trench coat. Behind them walked Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, holding a thick leather briefcase, and Olivia, who stood tall, her head held high, looking directly at Chloe with a look of quiet triumph. "Dr. Kenneth Vance, Marcus Vance, and Chloe Carter," the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You're under arrest for grand larceny, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit extortion, and wire fraud. No, no, Chloe screamed. In her sheer, unbridled panic, she forgot her act entirely. She threw back her chair, stood up on her own 2 feet, and tried to run toward the back balcony. But her legs, though toned, were stiff from a sudden burst of adrenaline, and she tripped over the hem of her emerald green dress, crashing heavily onto the hardwood floor. She lay there, sobbing hysterically, crawling desperately, not because she was paralyzed, but because she was a trapped animal with nowhere left to run. An officer stepped forward, pulled her arms behind her back, and clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, the metal cuffs fitting perfectly over the raw, red friction burns she had gotten from her own twisted games. "Ethan, please, I love you. I did it for us," she shrieked as they dragged her up. "You saved my legs. You're my husband. You can't do this to me." I stood there, watching her. I looked at her tear-streaked face, her tangled hair, and her desperate, ugly begging. For 5 years, this sight would have torn my heart out. It would have driven me to my knees, begging for her forgiveness, taking all her pain onto my own shoulders. But now, looking at her, I felt absolutely nothing. The medicine had finally worked. The guilt was gone. "You're right, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet, clinical, and completely cold. "I did save your legs. And now, you can use them to walk yourself into a prison cell." Marcus was handcuffed next, his arrogant face twisted in a snarl as he tried to look away from the cameras. Dr. Vance was white as a sheet, murmuring about his lawyer, realizing his medical career and his freedom were gone. Even Chloe's parents were escorted out for questioning regarding their knowledge of the fraudulent funds, their faces shielded in deep, burning shame. The apartment slowly emptied out until only Mr. Harrison, Olivia, and I remained. Olivia walked over to me, a soft, genuine smile on her face. "Thank you, Dr. Carter, for believing me, for clearing my name." "Thank you, Olivia," I said, shaking her hand. "Without your warning, I would still be in the dark." "What will you do now, Ethan?" Mr. Harrison asked, closing his briefcase. "The divorce will be finalized quickly. The state attorney is going to prosecute them to the fullest extent. You'll get your money back from the frozen accounts, and the hospital board has already cleared your name of any potential malpractice." I walked over to the large window, looking out at the city skyline. The stars were bright, the night was quiet, and for the first time in 5 years, my chest didn't feel heavy. I could breathe. "I think," I said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face, "I'm going to take that fellowship in Switzerland. I hear the air in Geneva is incredibly fresh."